Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kentucky Autism Training Center's presentation on Autism 101 in 2025. Update your autism toolbox. My name is Enid Hurtado Stremming, and I will be your facilitator for this presentation today. I work for the Kentucky Autism Training Center as a field training coordinator, specifically in the schools and out in the community. It is my pleasure to share this information with you today. As we get started, please take a picture of this slide or use your phone or other device to access the QR code or the bit.ly that you see in front of you, because this will take you to a digital folder, Google folder. So you'll have to have a Gmail address, folder which will have a lot of information that I talk about today. It will definitely have the PDF of this presentation so that you can go back through it later. Please know that any of the links that are in this presentation will be live in the PDF, so you'll be able to go back and watch any videos or access any of the resources outside of the folder that I refer to. Okay, hopefully that gave you enough time to access the information. Again, I would just take a picture of it so that you can access it later after the presentation. All right, so let's talk about the newest information that came in a couple of months ago, and that is the prevalence rate of autism in the United States. The new rate is 1 in 31, meaning there is a child diagnosed with autism in the 8-year-old group, because that's what they look at specifically, in every 31 8-year-olds. So one out of every 8-year-old group of children will have a child with diagnosed with autism. Now, keep in mind that this is data taken from 16 sites around the United States. So that doesn't represent every state, nor does it represent the whole state that it pulled the information from. So hopefully in the future, we will be able to access more sites and be able to have a more accurate count. Because from what I hear from a lot of families and school staff, 1 in 31 is still not low enough. They believe that the prevalence is actually higher. So maybe it's less than 31. So, which if you think about it, that means that in a school, there is at least one child with autism in every classroom, if you think of it that way. Um, Okay. In addition to that, if you would like to learn more about what resources are out there for the whole lifespan for individuals with autism, you can access the CDC. That's one great resource. I know that's not usually a resource for age specific information, but the CDC has changed their autism web pages. It now provides a lot more information about from 0 to adults. I'm not sure what the cutoff is, but I'd like to say 0 to 99, but I'm not sure if that is true. You can go to CDC and select autism and see what they have to share. All the information has been posted in the last 2 years from what I've seen. You also, when you access this PDF, you can also click on either one of these circles with the person reading a book on each side of the slide that you see in front of you, and it will take you to different CDC web pages that I recommend to get started at, because they have the most amount of information that families need. Okay. Another great resource for caregivers in Kentucky, since we are the Kentucky Autism Training Center, is KY Spin. As some of you may know, every state in the United States is federally mandated to have an organization made up of parents, caregivers, that to support other caregivers that have a child with a disability in one of the 12 disability categories. So, one of the great things about KY Spin is that not only do they provide information in different formats, but they also will provide a mentor as well. Now, if you don't live in the state of Kentucky, like I said, your state should have one. You will also find that information on KY Spin. They can help you find your own state's federally mandated caregiver support group. All right, so since we're updating information in 2025, um, it's pretty much this whole session is to ensure that everybody's on the same page and understanding what autism is today. It is Autism is one of those disability categories that updates at least every 5 years, meaning that it almost, it's like waves of a lake or the ocean where a new wave will come in with new information. It takes a little bit of the information from before and combines it all together. So we just want to make sure that you are up to date with all your autism information. So whether you've been in this field for a while, you've been a parent or a caregiver of a child and they are in their teen years or an adult, or you're just starting out, all of the information in this session should be relevant to you, whether it's a reminder or a validation of your knowledge, or it provides you some new information and you can use it to access resources and talk about it with other service providers. So, the definition of autism is based off of the diagnosis, which is um, the medical format. Now, the medical format is deficit focused. And the reason I say that is because I don't want this slide to define your child. Um, the deficit model is the medical model because the medical model is responsible for providing services. And so it looks at the deficit so that the correct services can be provided for. Okay. So I just want to let you know that this is just one little piece of the whole umbrella of autism, right? But it's important because it allows service providers, teachers, and even parents to know what type of services and resources to ask for. So the three main, right, categories of autism is there's a deficit in social interactions with others to different degrees, okay? Communication with others and just that two-way. So specifically the communication access, whether that means that a child may be non-speaking or the child may be speaking but may not have the knowledge of the functional speech of how to either ask a question or how to respond to a question. And we'll get more into that in a little bit. Um, and then they also have a range of behaviors, interests, or activities that interrupts their ability to function in everyday life. So we all have a range of behaviors, interests, and activities, right? We all may have some challenges with communication with others. And in certain situations, we also may have some difficulties with social interactions with others. But it's only when these categories or the characteristics within these categories interrupt and interfere with a person being successful and being able to express themselves, meet their needs, their wants, express their opinions, being able to access the resources and be successful participants in their life, whether it's at school or home or community. That's when it becomes a deficit. Okay, that's when services are needed, and that's when the diagnosis of autism usually occurs. So, just wanted to make sure that is established as we talk about it. Now, the next few slides are going to be the diagnosis of autism per the DSM, and the DSM is the diagnostic manual that psychiatrists and psychologists will use to make mental health diagnoses. Again, so that they know what type of services the person needs. And this is from the 2013 one. I know that sounds like a long time ago. There was a more updated one, the 2022, but the diagnosis is not as available, and not much has changed from what I've read. So I still included the 2013 because that was when big changes in the diagnosis of autism was made. If you would like to access the diagnosis of autism per the DSM 5 or the diagnostic manual, you can click on this little icon of a little piece of paper. As you can see, that's dog-eared, and it'll take you to that. It will also be in the digital resource folder that I mentioned to you earlier in the presentation. So, as you've probably been reading as you look at this, one of the big things that change is that they included all of these characteristics as far as deficits in social communication and social interaction. So, that used to be two out of one, at two out of three, or it wasn't every single one of them needed to be identified, but now it is all of these need to be part of the profile of the student. Um, Oops, sorry. And then for the repetitive patterns of behavior, it also needs to be at least two of the following of these, okay? Um, and just in case a child is being diagnosed after they've received early intervention, uh, the way it works for the diagnosis is that the child would have had these characteristics even earlier on. So even if they may not have it to the same degree anymore because they did receive early intervention services, if they ever had these characteristics and they were interfering with their ability to be successful in life, then they would qualify still. Okay, so I just want to make sure you know that. Also, another thing that occurred in 2013 diagnoses in the DSM-5 is that there no longer is a Asperger's category. Okay, Asperger's got placed underneath the autism umbrella. And part of the reason for that was because they found that if Asperger's were separate, they were not receiving the correct services. Remember, this is all about receiving the best services to be able to help the child be the most successful they can in life. So the Asperger's diagnosis was not allowing for all the students under that category to receive the services they need. Also, there was another category called PDD NOS, NOS. Those are all acronyms, okay? And that also got placed underneath the autism and umbrella. So a lot of people ask, like, why is there such an uptick in the prevalence? And a lot of it has to do that even though this came out in 2013, there's a lot more awareness and education about autism. What we know about these students, what this actually means, is a lot more known out in the mainstream society than it ever has been. And also, like I shared with you, the umbrella of autism has a lot more individuals in it than it did even, in 2012. The last big change in the diagnosis was in the late 1990s, and that was when people also thought there was a huge explosion of autism, and actually just the diagnosis was changed. So to include more people under it. So that is partially what is happening between the change in diagnoses and just the knowledge, awareness, and acceptance by mainstream society. All right, so one characteristic I want to call out that was a big change, and actually it was an inclusion of this characteristic as part of the diagnosis of autism, was this number 4 under the range of behaviors. And fixations. And this has to do with the hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment. Before 2013, there was nothing like this as part of the diagnosis. People knew that that individuals with autism were sensitive, uh, depending on the sense itself, but to the degree that was not as known, as well known as it is once it became part of the diagnosis. And even now, a lot of people don't realize this aspect of it, which is why I'm really highlighting it. Um, because of technology and being able to see how the brain works and how different people react to, different environments and their senses, we now know so much more about how the individual that may have an overreactive or underreactive sensory system, how that affects their ability to function every day. And individuals with autism or autistics, depending on the preference of terminology, um, uh, most of them will identify as having either a hypo or hyposensory system. So let's learn a little bit about that, just so that we are also on the same page and understand what I'm referring to when we talk about that. So in 2025, there are 8 senses. I know we all grew up learning about the 5 senses, but at this point, we do know that there are 8 senses, and we're going to watch a quick video for you to learn about them if you have not heard about the other 3, or maybe you just haven't heard about the 8th one yet. So.
Every day of our lives, our senses give us a huge amount of information. This information is sent to our brain, which does the job of making sense of.
Sorry, this was not the one I wanted. We'll have to take this part out because I was ready. There we go.
We have 8 senses. 5 you have probably heard of: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And 3 that you may not be familiar with. The vestibular sense, sometimes known as the gravity or balance sense, allows us to move smoothly. It helps us with balance while we walk and run, and to stay upright when we sit and stand. Proprioception is the sense of self-movement, force, and body position. It is present in every muscle movement you have. Without proprioception, you wouldn't be able to move without thinking about your next step. Interoception helps you understand and feel what's going on inside your body. For example, when you're hungry, thirsty, in pain, or need the toilet. Imagine for each of our 8 senses, we have a cup. And for us to feel regulated, each cup needs to be full. Each time we get some sensory input for one of our senses, it fills up the cup a little. For each sense, some of us have big cups and some of us have small cups. Imagine you have a small cup for sound. It fills up quickly with a little noise, and any more would feel overwhelming. Imagine you have a big cup for proprioception. You will need lots of movement to feel regulated. Understanding someone's sensory profile is really important in order to know what they need to feel, learn, and perform at their best.
Okay. There's another video that's also connected, and we will watch the very beginning of it, but it kind of provides what happens when the glass is too full or not full enough. We won't watch the whole video, but we will watch the beginning. And then you can watch it on your own when you access the PDF.
Large amount of information. This information is sent to our brain, which does the job of making sense of all this information. Our brain filters out any information that it deems to be unnecessary in order to understand the situation we find ourselves in, so that it can focus on what is important. For many people, and not just those with special educational needs, this filtering process may not get the balance right, letting through more or less information than would be ideal.
These sensory differences can cause different situations to be more challenging for the child or young person. Imagine you have a sensory cup and your brain drip feeds it with information from your senses. If our brain's filter lets through too much information, it is as if your sensory cup is being filled up very quickly. This can cause sensory overload. Imagine having a conversation with a friend at home. For somebody with sensory overload, they wouldn't be able to help being aware of the program on TV, the clock ticking, the temperature, the movements their friend is making, the smell of food, the cat, the dripping tap, the washing machine, and so on. This can make concentrating on the conversation a very difficult and stressful task. For those who have difficulty expressing how they feel in these situations, this may result in negative behaviour. Even simple everyday situations can prove difficult to those with sensory overload. On the other hand, if the brain lets through too little information, it is as if the sensory cup is being fed with very small amounts of information. It can take a long time for the cup to be full, and this can cause a child to be sensory seeking. For those children who are sensory seeking, the same situation of having a conversation at home may feel understimulating. This can result in behaviours that are intended to fill these sensory gaps, such as fidgeting, chewing, fiddling, or moving around the room. Remember, what we see of a person's behaviour is only the tip of the iceberg. There is a lot more going on behind the scenes than they may be able to tell you. See behaviour, think sensory.
Okay. So hopefully that some of those images and some of those explanations you could relate to, and you think, wow, that's my child. From what we hear from self advocates, which are adults with autism who speak out and explain what it's like to be a child with autism in the school system and at home and having to learn all these different, how to deal with your body and coping mechanisms and just talking about the experience of this. We know that this can occur during the day all day long sometimes. Just depends on how regulated they are and like if they're sick or if they have allergies, obviously their body is going to be off balance, just like ours would be. And they may have a more challenging time being able to regulate. Um, the setting, if it's very stressful, confusing, that's going to trigger them. So anxiety will trigger the off balance, and then they will be struggling the whole time. It depends on their coping skills. How well are they able? Sorry about that. How well are they able to be able to not only be aware of what's going on in their body, but then mask it or hold it together so that, they could be as successful as possible while their body there doesn't feel right. If you think about it, we've all probably been in that situation before, but we learn how to self-regulate ourselves, and we learn how to ask for help, how to access resources, and that's what, we want for our kids too. So let me dive a little bit deeper into it so you understand like how important this is to everyday functioning if you haven't already gotten a clue already from the videos we just watched. So one of the evidence-based practices that we at KATC rely on, and that means that this has been proven over and over through for by different people doing the same research to ensure that it was true, the results were true, was that through these senses, when they are balanced, we have the greatest ability, and this goes for everyone, okay? We have the greatest ability to pay attention, to coordinate our bodies, to move our eyes, to sit up straight, eye-hand coordination, our language skills and our listening skills, our ability to be in space and not trip over things or be, clumsy, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, motor planning, how we're going to, be able to pick up that cup, to how we're going to play a game. Just so many things that our body needs to do every day just to be successful. It's all reliant on our senses being balanced. When they are, when we're in a good place, then if you look on the right side, and they call it a state of arousal or alertness, because this is the occupational therapy world, that's a medical world. So it allows for us to be able to have executive functioning skills like planning and organizing, impulse control, be able to pay attention, be able to remember things, be able to initiate a task, and be able to just be aware of what's going on and our emotional control. So you can see that have how if you have dysregulated senses and then your brain already has an inability or a deficit in being able to regulate when going into different settings, how that could be that could affect your ability to pay attention, listen, be able to follow instructions, and all the stuff that makes us successful in life. Well, luckily we have George to explain what it's like for a child in elementary school, fourth grader, to live with not only sensory, but just with autism in general. So, George, he made this video for his classmates at school, and I think this is a really important one to hear from somebody who experiences this of how they have grown through it, how, what happens in the classroom and how he explains it. So as we're listening to this video, please, write down for yourself, and then you can always go back and play this video multiple times because the link will be in the PDF, as you can see right there. You should see a picture of George on there, not this black screen. And you can show it, watch it yourself multiple times or show it to other people because it's a good way for people to understand this is one person's interpretation, but the explanation of why things happen. Okay, where is George? Oh, I thought I had the video George. Well, here comes George. And this is on YouTube.
Hi everybody, my name is George. Sometimes I go by Geo, or when I'm laying down fat beats, you can call me DJ Joyo. In fact, all the music you hear in this video was written and performed by me using a computer software called Logic Pro X. Let me tell you a little about myself. I have fun dancing. I have fun making music. I love to draw and make art. And wait for it. I have this thing called autism. I didn't speak until I was almost 3 years. In fact, my parents weren't sure if I would ever speak at all. And we all know how that turned out. It's Geometry George here, or Geo for short, and we're going to talk all about quadrilaterals and how they're all around us. Most of the time, I can make eye contact with you when you speak to me. That wasn't always the case. Like a lot of other kids with autism, I might not have been looking, but that didn't mean I wasn't listening. Speaking of listening, I can hear and see a lot of things and sounds all at the same time, which sometimes makes it hard to focus on any one sound or thought. That's why it may take a little more time to answer you when you ask me a question. I also tend to take what people say literally. That means if you say take a seat, you might find one less chair in your classroom. If you say it's raining cats and dogs, I might think, "Oh, I'm getting a puppy." If you say fall is coming, I might plop to the ground. If you say I'm so hungry I could eat a horse, I might get a little nauseous. If you say play music by ear, I might easily bang my head on a piano. And if you say keep your eyes peeled, that's just gross. So if you're very specific when you talk to me, everybody wins. Let's talk about my senses. I love to touch and feel different textures and temperatures. Not all kids with autism like touching or being touched, but I do. I don't like yogurt. I don't think that has anything to do with my autism, but the fact that I can smell it from across the room, yeah, that probably does. I'm extremely enthusiastic about a lot of different things. Sometimes when I get very excited about something, I flap my hands or bounce up and down, or as you may have already noticed, I sometimes get frustrated when I get interrupted or when something doesn't go as planned. Or when something unexpected happens, or when I make a mistake, or when I don't get called on, or when I'm.
Keep going.
But I messed up.
I know, that's okay. Keep going.
Or when I don't get a turn. Those last two are just kid things to be frustrated about, and I'm a kid just like you. Because all us kids are different in our own ways, right? Sometimes I get so frustrated that I get more upset than most people would. For longer than most people should. I might get too loud. Or I might scream.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, down.
I love you.
Don't be afraid to come ask me about it. No, seriously, it's okay. Just come ask me about it. I like having fun, just like you. So if you ever see me playing by myself, it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't want to play with you too. I always want to play with you. I like the same stuff you do. I think farts are hilarious, but not all the time. I like Harry Potter, Leviosa, My Singing Monsters, Minecraft, and tacos. Thank you for hearing all about me and my adventures with autism.
Okay. Now, remember, this is just one person's perspective and experience with autism, but I think that there were probably a few things that he identified that you could probably relate to with if you are a caregiver of a child with autism. Some of it's their smells, and then this is all, some of them is their communication, wording, right? He said he takes things literally. Um, the yogurt, he could smell it across the room. The way his brain works and all these things coming at him, he has to take time to focus before he could figure out what he needs to focus on because everything equally comes at him. So look at the video and you'll see quite a few things and what he recommends to do, to be able to help him um, in different situations. All right, so needless to say, autism is truly a spectrum. In these different categories, there, even in that sensory responsiveness, there could be a hypo or hyper social interaction. You could have a passive person to a very active person. For gross motor skills, you could have somebody who's very awkward to somebody who's very agile, right? And then there's all just right in the middle as well. Again, remember, it doesn't really matter unless it's negatively affecting their ability to be successful in life. And that's when it becomes part of the diagnosis of autism. So, some of you, as caregivers with the reports from the diagnosis, you know that that initial report you had gave you a level for the child. But these levels can change, right? A lot of times when children are diagnosed when they're young, and they've found to have deficits in multiple domains or regions, then they may be a level 3. But with early intervention and services, they may become a level 2. If they're non-speaking, they may be a level 2, but maybe our own grade levels. So you would think they'd be a level 1, but the non-speaking communication aspect, or at least not having enough communication to be able to respond in class, uh, may keep them at a level 2. So it really, again, remember, it all has to do with the services. That's all this is related to, and making sure that they can access the correct services. Now, if you've never heard this before, or you saw it, but now your kid's in school or they've been through school and nobody talked about the levels, this is something that the school psychologist will interpret in terms of the eligibility when it comes to services in the schools. And so that's maybe why you haven't heard that, but you would definitely hear this in the medical services outside of school, because this is part of the medical diagnosis, which leads us to the difference between the two. What's the difference between the medical diagnosis, the one we've been talking about so far, and educational eligibility, which is what they use at school for the students to be able to access services? The difference is kind of what I just shared with you. Medical diagnosis is outside of the school. It has to do with accessing services, from the first day of diagnosis till when they enter a early intervention program in the school. The services at home would still be under the medical diagnosis, but at school, you may have to provide them with the paperwork of the diagnosis. But they are also going to do some other assessments to ensure that the students are receiving the correct services they need to be successful in a school setting. So that's the big difference, right? So educational eligibility has to do with the school setting, and medical diagnosis is pretty much providing services for everything else: home, community, um, I mean, what else is there, right? Home and community, and then education eligibility is school. And again, those are all huge categories. You see on this slide on the right side, it says not required to have a medical diagnosis for educational eligibility. That is under the federal law. There's no requirement, but then the states interpret it for their own. And in Kentucky, most of the school districts do require the medical diagnosis to receive educational eligibility of under autism. So if your child does not have a diagnosis yet, but everyone's been telling you, and you're on the wait, everyone's been telling you to get it, and you're on the waiting list, and they what they'll do is they'll put your child maybe under a different category, but still provide him with the services that he needs based off all the assessments that they have provided. So if you would like to learn a little bit more about that, I have another link for you. This is also in your digital resource folder. You would see on the bottom right corner of the screen, you see a person in an apple. This will take you to the Kentucky ASD or autism guidance document that was just released. I think they just updated it in 2022, I believe. And so it will explain to you how everything works in Kentucky when it comes to autism and resources that you can access within the state. On the left side, the medical diagnosis, we looked at this at the beginning, but if you'd like to see, the whole thing from the DSM-5, I have that for you, and you can click right there, or you can look within your digital resource folder. All right. So I share this information for you just so that we can set the foundation of understanding of what autism, what that diagnosis of autism really means, and what it's referring to, and how it may look like to you in the home setting, what you may hear about at school, out in the community, and how can we provide the services and the supports the students need to be as successful as possible. Well, there is an organization called Teach, and it's out of the UNC, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill location. It's been around for about 30 years, and its complete focus is not only studying and researching the best strategies for to teach students with autism, but also for them to be able to learn what skills they need to learn to be more successful in life. And so this is um, one of their graphics that they explain how behavior, the causes of behavior for autism. And they have identified these 8 categories that are always below the surface, and these are affecting the behavior of the individual. Okay. And so when we think about behavior, a lot of times when we hear that term, it's usually we're referring to challenging behavior or socially unacceptable behavior, even violent behavior, aggressive behavior. But really, the word behavior just describes the actions, right? So it may be desirable behavior, but it also could be the challenging, undesirable behavior. So really, what it enables a student to have successful behavior that will enable them to be successful is right here. It's if they're able to self-regulate those senses, right? They're able to access any supports um, in so their communication, how people talk to them, the specific language that's being used that they can understand, and their ability to cope, to successfully cope when there are frustrations, when there are changes in the environment, anything that triggers their dysregulation and anxiety. How are they able to cope? So this will dictate how well they're able to balance, and then that's the behavior that you see, because you have to believe, right? Everybody does their best. Kids really want to be successful in any setting that they're at home, at in the classroom, out in the therapy, in the community. They just may not be able to, whether it's physiological because of these things happening below the surface, or they just don't understand what they're supposed to do to be successful, and they're a little overwhelmed. If any of you have ever been anxious or sick or exhausted, I know that none of you have. But if you've ever felt that way, you know that it's challenging to be your best, right? It's sometimes words are hard to say. Uh, Understanding what you're supposed to do in a new situation is sometimes hard. So if you take that and if that's happening to you every day in most of the situations or settings that you're in, you can see how it would be exhausting and it would be frustrating as well. So just keep this in mind, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but we're going to talk about it at a pretty superficial level. I'm just going to uh, introduce you to these concepts. And then in the next part 2 of this presentation, we'll dive a little bit more deeper and talk about some implementation of strategies that may help with supporting students who, are challenged by any or all of these categories. Okay, so these are called, that's why I didn't want to say what it was because it's on the next slide. These are considered learning styles of autistics. Okay, so all those words that you saw underneath the glacier in the last slide, they're considered learning styles, meaning they may need some more support. And these learning styles because of everything else that's occurring. So auditory processing can be challenging. Implicit learning, they may miss out on implicit learning when they're young. So skills that everybody thinks kindergartners should have or first graders should have, or even teenagers in sixth, seventh, eighth in high school, they think that everybody should have. They may not have because the way their brains work, they may not have learned the implicit lessons that you just learn from being around other people, from your family, from your caregivers, from being, at school. They may have not learned those if they're not taught to them. So explicitly, meaning told directly how to do something, probably socially, is what I'm a lot of times it is where the misunderstanding occurs, or communication wise, how to respond in a certain situation or when a person asks you a certain question, and then pairing that with a successful experience, right? So not only directly, providing instruction on how to navigate these social and communication situations, but also pairing it with a successful experience of it that gains them a friend, that gains them success and getting to do something, so that it becomes part of their learning process in their brain. So sometimes if this doesn't all occur for them, they may miss out on social lessons, if you think of it that way, things that happen out in the social world that, people aren't telling you directly, but you may learn indirectly just because you want to become friends with somebody, or you really like the person and you want to have a conversation with them. So that's where implicit learning comes in. Attention, I think we all know that one. Multiple perspectives. That's also a developmental level. So if they're not, above that 8-year-old level, they may or may not have that multiple perspectives. Same thing with executive functioning. That is all taught, right? None of us have that by nature. So that needs to be taught to them. Again, that's where that implicit learning may occur, may not, may uh, have them skip out on certain lessons that are social. And then sensory processing, which is what we've discussed earlier in this presentation. So I'm just going to explain each of these and how they affect individuals with autism, or may affect, right? It doesn't, like you saw, it's the spectrum. So some may be affected and some may not. So auditory processing can be challenging uh, a lot of times because auditory processing comes in, something may verbal instructions or a verbal conference may be said once. And if they are distracted in any way, and you saw from the video with George how he can get distracted there, when there's lots of different sounds in the environment or people walking through, it may take him a moment to focus. And if somebody says something during that time, that person may not, quote unquote, hear it. Their brain not be able to process it. So a lot of times they rely on their vision, on their seeing sense, to be able to understand what's going on in the environment, because things they can see are more permanent, right? They're more concrete. Whereas words, if they didn't catch it, then they may not even know what that person said, and so therefore they don't even know what the person expects them to say, which you can imagine can be very anxiety producing. So um, that may be occur. It's also the words that are used, even if they do hear them, maybe they don't. The words are abstract, and they're not sure what the expectations behind the words are. You can see on this slide it says behave yourself or be nice. What does that actually mean? What does that look like in real life? Those words could be up for interpretation if you think about it. They're very subjective of the person saying it, the setting, right? So being specific, for example, if instead of saying behave yourself, you can say, please be quiet, please stop talking and wait for me to let you know when it's a good time to talk. Or if they're not sitting down and everybody else is sitting down, you can say, please sit down. And I'll let you know when you can stand up again, because as you can see, look around, everybody's sitting down right now. That's the expectation. And then when they do it, you definitely have to let them know that they did a good job doing it. Yes, that's exactly what I was talking about. Because again, remember, they're used to not always getting the message. So if they don't know they did a good job, then they may think they did something wrong, and then they may not continue doing that behavior. So really encouraging them, giving them a lot of praise when they are on task will be a lot more helpful to them than telling them what they're doing wrong, because they don't always know what they need to do to be successful. And that's what they really want, right? That's what anybody wants, to know how to be successful. So yes, I know a lot to do with language, right? And distractions in the environment. That's all about auditory processing and whether they're successful with it or not. So what are you supposed to do? Um, Again, we'll learn more about that in the next session, but I think that some of you may have some ideas. Visual writing things down will help them. And we'll talk about that more. Implicit learning, I kind of started to explain you what that is a little bit earlier. What that will give them some problems with, though, why that is challenging, is generalization. They have a hard time generalizing. Again, some kids have a harder time than others. A lot of times, the more they're exposed to lessons, so the more successful experiences they have with generalization, the more they'll be able to generalize. They may need a direct instruction with that, though, meaning that you have to explain it to them directly using language, using may even, if there's like steps to it, like writing the steps down, using pictures. So there's a lot of different ways to help them with generalization. An example of this may be that, and we see this a lot in schools for kids that are in preschool and kindergarten, is that they may not use the bathroom at school because it's not doesn't look like the same bathroom at home, especially if they have not used other bathrooms, like they haven't gone to restaurants or other people's houses and used, different looking bathrooms. So we at the schools, we'll see this. When we talk to caregivers, we hear that they can use the bathroom at home, independently, but at school, they don't even want to walk into the bathroom. So that's it seems like an extreme example, but that is a common example that we experience in the school. So, and I think that gives a good idea of like how the generalization can be challenging for kids. Specific memory is stronger than integration ideas. We're going to look at that, of what that means when we get to attention. So attention, we already talked a little bit about this too, the fact that they can be distracted very easily. It also refers to the fact that they are very detail oriented, which is a strength a lot of times. But they do have a challenge. They can have a challenging time. Remember, everybody is different, uh, through seeing the big picture. Remember George in that video? They showed him on his teacher's lap when he was very little, crying. And I don't know if you read the caption, but it said, "You can't predict what's going to happen, George." Well, what happens, and remember, we hear this from self-advocates and just from research. They've even put the probes on the brain so they can see how the brain works when a child with autism looks at different parts of a picture. We've learned that when a child looks at a picture, like say, for example, in a storybook, that they're looking at the parts of the story that they can relate to, that has meaning for them. Okay, and that's a big part of autism, meaningfulness, how meaningful something is to them. And so if they're not looking at other aspects of the picture, then they may miss out on what's really going on in the whole setting of the picture, right? Like the whole big picture of it. They may just focus on different aspects of it. Um, and so their interpretation of what's going on in the story may be different than what actually is occurring, because they missed out on certain parts of the picture. Do you see a pattern here? Implicit learning, not missing out on certain lessons in social situations because their attention can be so focused once they're able to focus in. It also can cause some difficulty with multitasking, making choices, or judging things because, again, they're not looking at everything. They're looking at what's the most meaningful to them, and they may stay focused. This relates to sticky attention. Yes, that's an actual medical term, and it refers to the difficulty of being able to stop one activity and move to another activity. I think that you probably have all experienced this, especially with iPads. That's what we hear a lot, where or they're watching a certain movie or doing a certain activity and they cannot stop doing it to start another one. And that is what sticky attention. They actually see that in the brain. It's a loop that occurs. It's very interesting and really enlightening too, because once you know, then you're like, okay, I need to do certain things to help them with shift their attention to the new activity that's coming up, or to stop the video, or whatever it is that happens. And usually it occurs when something is very meaningful to them, uh, like their favorite video or their favorite person. So that's attention. And now here's the picture that I wanted to show you. And that's also goes back to implicit learning when it's, specific to one piece of a picture. So this picture, very chaotic, right? Lots of things going on. You could look at this picture for the next 5 minutes and list a bunch of different activities going on. But for a child who has difficulties, or at least has the ability to focus in, zero in on specific parts of a picture, they're and their brain is trying to filter out all the distractions. You see where this is going? They're going to focus in on what is the most meaningful to them, what they understand the most. Okay, what is the most understandable in this picture? And it's probably going to be something in this picture like this that they have personal experience with. So, for example, if George was looking at this picture and he went canoeing with his cousins and family during the last summer, then he may focus in on the bunnies that are in the canoe. And so somebody may say, "Oh, yeah, you're right that the bunnies are canoeing. They look like they're having fun. What else is going on in the picture?" And George may say again that the bunnies are in the water canoeing. And he may talk more about what the specific bunnies in the canoe are doing and how that reminds him of certain things that when he went canoeing, but will not look at the rest of the picture unless he's directly told to look at it. I mean, for some kids, you may even need to block that part temporarily. You say, okay, let's pause, because a lot of kids now, that seems to be the golden word, because they understand pause from the iPads and the phones. So you say, let's pause looking at this. We'll be back to it, but let's look at other parts of the picture. So sometimes some kids will need that direct instruction to really understand big pictures of stories, or pictures, or whatever the case may be. Multiple perspectives. I think that some of you may understand why this may be challenging. Again, if you have young kids, this is something that they don't have developed yet. They're not expected to have developed until around 8 years old. But if you have older, or you have around the 8-year-old child, then you may see this. They may have a hard time understanding what the other people think differently than them. Some kids say that they think that everybody knows what they know. And so this also will also have also affects their ability to multitask too. So here's a quick example of what I mean. This is a I don't know if it's a test. It's an assessment that they may provide to a child who's coming in to be assessed for autism, 8 years old. So again, remember. Um, so they, as you read this is, as you can see, called the Sally Ann test. So the big thing is the last question: where will Sally look for her ball? Well, for most of us, and a lot of times I will cover up the bottom right side, so you don't know why I'm asking you this. Most of us, because we know how this works, we will say that because Sally didn't see Anne move the ball, she will look in the basket, right? But a child with autism, because they think that everybody knows what they know, will say that Sally will look in the box because that's where Anne put it, not realizing that when the person's not in the same room and Anne didn't see it, even if you explain that to them before you ask the question, they will still say that. So it just talks about if a child has a challenging time with multiple perspectives, then that's usually one of the signs. And then the big one, executive functioning, which I would say most teenagers have a challenging time with. But it specifically applies to autism when it comes to abstract ideas and being able to figure out, such as time, because it's not concrete. So being able to be understanding how to control something that's abstract and you can't see, and understanding how that affects their life. Sequencing tasks. So being able to understand all the steps of a task to be successful. Initiation of tasks or communication. That's a big one. They know that that is a big one for kids with individuals with autism, unless they've practiced a lot and can be able to overcome that. I guess you can say it's an inclination to not initiate. Some people interpret it as, being shy, um, not knowing what to say, and that could be what it is. But they also know that the initiation part is very challenging. Concept of finished, like knowing when something's done and it's can't be happen again. Again, it's an abstract idea. Need to develop and teach organizational strategies. Again, all teenagers. And self-regulation. So there it goes back to what we talked at the beginning, this whole self-regulation of your senses and being able to control your emotions and being able to understand how to navigate social situations. That's all self-regulation of being, keep your body as calm as possible so that you can think as well as you can. Um, and that is related to sensory processing, which we started out with. So some things that, that we think about with behavior and when now that you understand a little bit more what we know about the sensory processing theory, that the overstimulation can lead to meltdowns. And this is physiological. This is very different than tantrums. Tantrums is behavior that communicates that they want something or need something. And as soon as they get it, it stops. So that's a tantrum. That's just socially inappropriate or undesirable behavior that they are in total control of. The child is totally in control of, and they will stop as soon as they get what they want. A meltdown, okay, and these terms didn't always mean these things. At some point, meltdown and tantrum meant the same thing, okay? But now we know that for meltdowns, that's a physiological thing. That happens in your body, and unless you know what interventions can calm the system down or what the person needs, and this is for all of us. This is for all of us, but we learn this implicitly to be successful. But some individuals who are going up and down, right? Hyperactive, hypoactive, like their senses are out of balance. If they don't know how to regulate their senses, then their body can build up until they have a meltdown. They can also, it also can look like understimulation, which is sensory seeking behaviors, kids that run into other things, climb up on a desk or a table and jump off things, pinching, biting. Those are all sensory seeking behaviors. And the extreme of that is a shutdown where they just completely shut down and they might climb under something and no matter what you say or no matter what you do, they will not move. They cannot because they physically cannot hear you. Their sense of hearing has shut down. Their whole system has shut down because they're under hypo, like they can't take any more. Um, Filtering and modulating input. So again, that may cause sensory processing dysfunction where too much in the environment overstimulates them. Dealing with open space, individuals with autism, autistic individuals in general have a hard time with open space, unstructured environments or unstructured activities, because again, they don't know what needs to be done. They don't know what the expectations are. They don't know how to be successful. They're not good, they may not be good at being able to, just follow what other people are doing because they don't even notice that other people are doing things that are differently than them. So again, open space can be anxiety producing because, again, they don't know what they're supposed to be doing to be successful. And that all leads to anxiety, which I think for anybody, anxiety as it builds, and if you can't calm down the anxiety, it can lead, to some kind of meltdown. I'm not going to play this because we're a little bit short for time, but I wanted you to hear from a self-advocate, one of the adults that talks about having autism and what it, how that applies to her, what she knows about it, what helps, what doesn't. This is Amethyst. She has a vlog. So if you click on this video, it will take you to the video. It's on YouTube, just like George. And I even put the timestamp, so because her video is 10 minutes long. So if you don't want to watch the whole thing, I just recommend going to the stamps. And the big thing to hear from her is about stimming and that how that is a form of self-regulation for autistics. It also is a way to know if you're not sure, if your student is, or you're sorry, your child is is dysregulated, is if they start stimming, it's because they're trying to self-regulate. They're trying to calm themselves down. Their body is feeling out of balance and they're trying to balance it out, to calm themselves down, maybe, or alert themselves, depending on what's going on. Um, and how a sensory kit may helps Amethyst be able to access different environments, because if something does affect her, she has something in her kit that will help her. And for her, some of it is she has earplugs, sunglasses, a baseball hat. I can't remember what. I think she even has wipes for because I guess she gets overstimulated by sticky stuff. But yeah, I would recommend listening to her video. And then if there's anything else, she has lots of videos. So if you'd like to listen to anything else, I'd recommend her as well. And how do we do that? Well, we teach them, but that we use specific strategies to teach here at Kentucky Autism Training Center. And this is all in a 2020 report. There's a big story behind this report, but basically this report started back in 2000. I believe the first one came out in 2014, but the effort to get this reports out were started by parents who knew that discrete trial training was not the only evidence-based practice that could teach their children with autism. And so it shouldn't be the only one that should be covered by insurance, which, back in the 2000s, that's what it was, the 40 hours a week of discrete trial training. And it was the only evidence-based practice for students with autism. And so even in the classrooms, that's what we used. Now we hardly use that right now. In ABA clinics, they do. That is their primary form, but they will also use other evidence-based practices because now we have the research behind that, behind which ones work the most effectively for autistics, and that's thanks to parents. So thank you, caregivers and parents, for making that effort. So I put this in your resource folder as well. At this point as of 2020, because another report has not come out yet, these are the 28 evidence-based practices that have been found to be most effective with individuals with autism or autistics. Um, if as you look at the list, you're going to see that there's just a lot that are just best teaching strategies. So it's really how you implement these strategies is what makes a difference. Um, we focus on the foundational five, which are five categories, and that these are visual supports, antecedent-based interventions, which is anything that you do before you expect the student to be successful, so setting them up for success in a way. Reinforcement, and specifically positive reinforcement, not punishment, but positive reinforcement. Systematic instruction, which includes evidence-based practices such as task analysis, discrete trial, time delay, modeling, and video modeling, and prompting, and social communication strategies such as functional communication training, social narratives or social stories, scripting, peer-mediated instruction, and AAC or augmentative and alternative communication. Now, I know I just threw out a lot of terms at you that you may or may not know what they refer to. I mean, reinforcement, most people know what that is referring to, visual supports, but the others may seem a little bit more, you know, teachy or psychology based, and they can be. But in our next uh, session, which is the part two of the session, I will explain them a lot more and explain how you use these strategies to support the learning differences that have been identified by Teach for that autistics are challenged with the most, the ones that we just went over. Okay. So just remember the whole goal now that you have a good foundation about autism in 2025 is to learn through your own experience, learn from the therapist that your child is seeing, the teachers, learn how to best provide the supports for your students and for your children and adults, right? um, so that they can learn how to self-regulate, learn how to cope with all the challenges or even the triggers in the environment that may occur, their own anxiety from not having enough positive experiences in certain situations, the supports that are in place, that may be the visual supports, that may be supports as in if they're sensitive to light, maybe they need a baseball cap or sunglasses or maybe the lights off if it's the those the lights, the fluorescent lights, maybe the lamps need to be placed in a room. So little things like that. Just, collect information from the people who work with your child and who have worked with your child to find out what has worked to help them be successful, and also what can you learn more, about so that you can apply those strategies at home, and also instruct your student because your child will need, and I say student because you'll become the teacher, right? They may need some direct instruction over some situations or how to navigate some, especially social situations when it comes to being part of the family and at home and in the community. So we will talk about all of that in our next session. It'll be part two. Um, but I do want to leave you with this because so there is an organization called Autism Self Advocate Network. They are a group that was founded and is run by autistics. They are an advocacy group, so they do a lot of advocacy work, but they do have this video on their website that I really like the way that it ends, and it's for anybody who is newly diagnosed with autism. I'm guessing it's for, maybe middle school or high school and older. So it doesn't have to be newly diagnosed, but maybe just learning about what autism is at first. So you can see it's a 6-minute video, but I'd like you just to watch the last few, like the last minute of it, because I think it's a great message.
The good news is that your future is positive. Just be hopeful. Be honest about your needs and wants. Be observant of what works and doesn't work for you in your environment. Be prepared to meet your own needs. Educate yourself and others on what autism means to you. Focus on your strengths and talents. Use available resources and live your life to the fullest. By doing these things, you gain the power of creating a successful, fulfilling, hopeful future.
And I think, really that's all we want for any of our kids, right? So we just need to learn what works and what doesn't work. And Kentucky Autism Training Center, we're here to help you on that journey. So please check back in with us. There's also other organizations, of course, that may help. KY Spin, like I mentioned, definitely get a mentor if you need to help navigating any of the systems, and I know there's many, whether in school or outside of school. Get a mentor, ask questions, attend their activities. Also, there's the Affirm modules, those evidence-based practices I shared with you. This organization is part of UNC Chapel Hill, which is also where the Teach organization is, and they created modules and resources. You'll see that they are teacher focused, but they also created them for families too. There's some for paraprofessionals, and then there's even ones for that are specific for families that are at just starting out with their children being very young. So definitely check that out. It's free. So please take advantage of it. Sorry. And then the last one is actually out of Ohio. It's called Ocali, and they have lots of resources, lots of information on everyday situations. So whereas I told you about, this website's for evidence-based practices, this one's for caregivers. And then we have our KTC, which, we focus on evidence-based practices too, and things around Kentucky. Well, Ocali will talk about, puberty, talk about what can you do when you talk to other members of the family. So like, a lot of the in-between situations that you may come across, and they will have videos and resources around that too. So definitely another resource to check out as well. Well, thank you very much for attending this session. It is recorded. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at katc@louisville.edu. I hope to have some more resources to share with you when this video is posted, but definitely watch this video again before you come to the second session, which will occur in 2025 in the fall. And if you're watching this and it's past 2025, then just look for it on our YouTube channel and you'll see both parts. All right. Thank you so much. I know this may be a challenging journey, but there are a lot of us out here to help, and just keep on asking, and thank you for all you do. Take care. Bye-bye.